So in this video, we're going to talk about some conventions and expectations and structures and genres that you'll commonly find in academic writing, and many of them translate over into professional writing as well. So in academic writing, you're probably familiar already with the 5-paragraph essay structure, where you've got your claim in your introduction, 1, 2, 3 reasons, and then a conclusion. And that works really well for extremely short writing scenarios. So if you're writing a essay exam, for instance, that works great because it's so rigid and it's a template is what it is, and you can just slot everything into it. So don't throw it out completely, but for the most part, it's too simplistic and it's not really going to work in higher education. So we need to expand that. The first thing we need to do is throw out the idea of paragraphs. If you try to write a 5-page paper in a 5-paragraph essay, you're going to get a page-long paragraph, and no one wants to read that. Just trust me. No one wants to read it. I will put long cat on your essay if you do that. Long cat is long. So don't do that. The other thing is it's not thorough enough. It doesn't give us enough detail. But the basic structure of you need an introduction that tells what your main claim is, and then you need some number of points and evidence, and then a conclusion in which you discuss how that can be used, that remains. That basic structure can be applied to nearly any academic genre. So it's not a bad template, it's just not as useful as it should be. It's not generally applicable as a 5-paragraph template. But if we expand it to that sort of hourglass shape, then it becomes more useful. So we've got a lot of genres that we write in academic writing. We've obviously got the research essay that we're working on, which does not use the 5-paragraph structure. We're going to use something called INRAD, and we'll talk in detail about that later. But I'll give you a brief overview in this video. Other things that are very common that you'll encounter, you'll find the monograph, which is not something you'll probably ever have to write unless you go into higher ed, but you'll find many of your professors have written one, which is a single author book on one research project. The edited volume is a many-authored book where each author handles one chapter or so on one research topic, and everyone does their own research project within it. The conference paper is another very common research genre that you might encounter, and it's typically a 10 to 20 minute presentation that's meant to be delivered orally, but it's often written as a formal research paper that gets read at the conference. Literally, the origin of the term lecture is that someone gets up and reads to everyone so everyone can hear it at once. So the conference paper is a little more speculative in nature, a little less formal than the formal research paper, and it's typically about 8 to 12 pages long. So that's kind of the length that you're going to be writing for your research paper for this class. The formal research paper at the professional level is typically about 20 pages long, and you may wind up writing that for a senior thesis or a capstone course or something like that. Another common research genre is the research poster, where this is also presented at conferences, where you present your claim and your evidence and your method in a poster format, kind of like you might have done for a science fair or something like that. Another common one is the personal essay, which is similar to what we did with the literacy narrative, where you just tell your observations based on your own experience. And those are very commonly published, not just in academic work, but often in more meditative media outlets. So often in magazines like like Slate magazine or the New Yorker, you'll get a lot of personal essays as a kind of evidence of this person's experience with the subject. What they all have in common. So the expectations and structures that you will find across the board in research writing. And this applies to the academic genres I've named, and it also applies to grant proposals and executive proposals and so on that you might have to do in the business world, is that they all have a focus on evidence and argument. So like I talked about in the last video, we really want to make sure that all our reasons are supported with evidence and all our claims are supported with reasons so that we're building up to that main claim. And the focus is really on the evidence. So in a lot of other argumentative situations, like you're just talking with people at dinner or whatever, you might be focusing heavily on your reasons, but in this case, you're focusing heavily on your evidence. And academic writing tends to privilege logos over ethos and pathos as a rhetorical appeal, but that doesn't mean that the others aren't present. We use a lot of ethos in academic writing where we focus on where we put our name on the project and our institutional affiliation. I get a lot more ethos if I note that I'm affiliated with Ball State University than if I just put my name on that paper. So in academic writing, we use a lot of ethos behind the scenes, but we say that we privilege the logos, and our structures for the body of the project will privilege the logos. In pathos, we tend to devalue in academic writing, even though pathos is possibly one of the strongest ways to convince someone of something. So we handle it very gingerly in academic writing, even though outside of academic writing, it's a wonderful tool, and I certainly would not discourage you from using it appropriately. So one thing that's important here, I can't cover every genre here. There's no way in 10 weeks we can cover every genre, even just in academic writing. And certainly most of you aren't going into higher ed, so that's not going to be the most useful thing. So the question is, how do we figure out structures that are appropriate to a genre when we're approaching a new genre? So one thing we can do is look for formatting clues. We can look for the use of section headers, for instance. We can look for the use of space. Are there things that are set off to the side, like you might see in your textbook, or is everything in line? Or are there pictures? And where would the pictures appear? Do they appear in an appendix? Do they appear only at the beginning? Do they appear along the sides? Do they appear in line with the text? Where do they go? We can look at the section headers, like I said, and how are those section headers labeled? Are they teasers like chapter names, in which our main character faces great peril? Or are they more like, are they dry, like an instruction manual, Appendix A, charts, Appendix B, things like that. So we look at those as clues to what kind of a structure is expected here. Another thing that we can do is we look at multiple examples of the genre. It's not enough to just pick up one version of a genre and say, yep, that's what everything in this genre does, because without multiple points of data, how do we know that that's not something unique to that text and not something that is over the whole genre? So make sure you're looking at multiple examples. The more examples you look at, the better your analysis will be. Look at failed examples as well as excellent examples. So we tend to look at excellent examples and say, I want to imitate that. But failed examples work really well too, because you could say, well, where is the failure here and how do we avoid that? And so even if you get a bad grade on a paper or something, you can learn from that and say, okay, so what was it they commented on here that suggests where the failure or misunderstanding is? So that's a major tool that you can use. Another thing you can use is if you have a strong reaction to something in a genre and you're like, well, wait a second, why am I having that reaction? Whether that reaction is, wow, this is good, or, oh, this is awful, why did I even waste my time with it? You can always ask yourself, why did you have that reaction? And what causes that reaction? And is it a feature of the genre or just that one text? And look for patterns. And all of critical thinking is looking for patterns. So focus on how things are being said rather than on what's being said. That being said, do remember that subject can be a genre marker. So if you're writing about, say, cancer treatments, you're going to tend to write in a style similar to other medical writers, as opposed to if you're writing about writing instruction, you're going to write in a style similar to other writing instructors. And so you have to consider that your topic is related intimately to your audience and your genre as well. So one of the best ways to master a genre is simply to go out there and look at examples of it and do your own analysis of it.